At 40, Isabella Hatfield was the epitome of success. A self-made billionaire, she was the CEO of Hatfield Industries, a conglomerate that spanned tech, fashion, and real estate. Her name graced the cover of Forbes magazine more times than she could count, and her sprawling mansion overlooked the serene Malibu coastline. Isabella Hatfield's Malibu mansion was a symbol of her success. Perched on a cliff, its sleek glass walls reflected the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The interiors were no less impressive: marble floors, high ceilings, and modern art adorned every room. Her bedroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooked a private infinity pool that seemed to spill into the ocean. Yet, despite her achievements, her family and friends saw only one thing when they looked at her: a single woman. One afternoon, Isabella sat in her office, her desk piled with papers and her laptop humming softly. Her phone buzzed, displaying "Mom" on the screen. She sighed, bracing herself as she answered. "Hi, Mom," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Isabella, darling, how are you?" Her mother's voice was warm but carried an unmistakable edge of concern. "Busy, as usual," Isabella replied, glancing at the stack of contracts in front of her. "Well, I hope you're not too busy to think about your future." Isabella sighed, already sensing where this was going. "Mom, we've talked about this." "I know, but you're 40 now, Bella," her mother pressed. "Do you want to be alone forever? Don't you want children? Grandchildren for me?" "Mom, I want those things too," Isabella said, her voice softening. "But I haven't found the right person yet." "Maybe you're being too picky," her mother suggested. "You don't need a prince, just someone who'll love you and give you a family. Money isn't everything." Isabella felt a pound of frustration. "It's not about money, Mom. It's about trust. Do you know how many men I've met who are only interested in what I can give them?" Her mother sighed. "I just want you to be happy, Bella. You deserve that." "I know," Isabella said quietly. "But I won't settle for anything less than real love." One evening, Isabella decided to hang out with her friends. Her closest friends, Amanda and Claire, dragged her to an upscale bar. The atmosphere was lively, with soft jazz playing in the background and the clink of glasses echoing through the room. Isabella wore a sleek black dress and her favorite diamond earrings, though her expression betrayed her reluctance. "Bella, trust us," Amanda said, sipping her martini. "He's perfect for you. Handsome, successful, and single." "I don't need a perfect man," Isabella said, her tone dry. "I need an honest one." Claire rolled her eyes. "You're too cynical. Give people a chance. He's a hedge fund manager. Very charming." Isabella sighed, scanning the room. "Where is this Prince Charming of yours?" As if on cue, a man approached their table. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his smile gleaming. "Isabella," Amanda said, gesturing grandly. "This is Lucas." Lucas extended his hand, his eyes scanning Isabella a little too appreciatively. "Pleasure to meet you." Isabella shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Likewise." As the evening progressed, Lucas talked endlessly about his career, luxury vacations, and expensive cars. Isabella couldn't help but feel a growing sense of detachment. When Lucas excused himself to take a call, Amanda leaned in. "What do you think?" "He's charming," Isabella admitted, "but I've met too many men like him. It's all surface level." Claire groaned. "You're impossible." One breezy Saturday evening at Isabella's Malibu mansion. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the sleek, glass-paneled walls, and the faint sound of waves crashing against the cliff added to the serene ambience. Isabella had spent the afternoon preparing, choosing a bottle of aged wine from her cellar, setting the table with fine china, and donning a deep crimson dress that hugged her figure elegantly. She had begun to consider a suitor named Edward seriously. He was polished, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in her. Her mother and friends had been pressuring her to let someone in, and Edward felt like a safe choice. Edward arrived promptly, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit and polished leather shoes. He carried a bouquet of roses and wore his signature smile. "Your home is incredible," Edward said, glancing around as Isabella led him into the grand living room. The space was a perfect blend of luxury and warmth, with contemporary furniture, abstract art, and a massive chandelier that sparkled like a constellation. "Thank you," Isabella said, smiling. "Make yourself comfortable. Dinner will be ready shortly." Edward placed the roses on the marble coffee table and began to wander around the room, admiring the decor. Isabella excused herself to the kitchen, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. While she was away, Edward's eyes landed on a small display case near the fireplace. Inside was an exquisite collection of jewelry, including a platinum ring encrusted with diamonds. It sparkled under the soft lighting, its brilliance impossible to ignore. Glancing toward the kitchen to ensure he was alone, Edward opened the glass case. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the ring, the diamonds cold against his palm. Just then, Isabella's voice rang out. "Edward." He froze, his heart pounding. Quickly, he slid the ring into his pocket and turned to face her, forcing a casual smile. "Yes." Isabella stepped into the room, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Her sharp grey eyes immediately noticed the open display case. She paused, her gaze narrowing. "Why is the case open?" she asked, her tone calm but laced with suspicion. Edward's smile faltered. "Oh, I was just admiring your collection," he said, gesturing vaguely. "You have excellent taste." Isabella placed the wine and glasses on the coffee table, her eyes never leaving him. "Did you touch anything?" Edward hesitated, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. "Of course not," he said, his voice a little too quick. "Empty your pockets," she said firmly, stepping closer. Edward blinked, his smile completely gone. "What?" "Isabella, come on, that's ridiculous. You don't think?" "Empty your pockets," she repeated, her voice cold and commanding. Edward's face turned red. "I can't believe this," he stammered, attempting indignation. "You think I'd steal from you? That's insulting." Isabella crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. "You're stalling. I don't tolerate dishonesty, Edward. Either empty your pockets, or I'll call security." Edward's bravado crumbled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring, placing it on the table with trembling hands. "Isabella, I can explain," he said quickly. "I wasn't going to keep it, I just wanted to see it up close, and—" "Stop," Isabella interrupted, her voice icy. She picked up the ring and carefully placed it back in the display case. When she turned back to Edward, her expression was a mix of anger and disappointment. "I invited you into my home because I thought I could trust you," she said, her voice low but firm. "Do you have any idea how hard it is for me to let someone in? And this is how you repay me?" "Please, Isabella," Edward begged, stepping toward her. "It was a stupid mistake. I wasn't thinking. Give me another chance." She held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You've shown me exactly who you are, Edward. And I have no room in my life for thieves or liars. Leave. Now." Edward's shoulders slumped. He looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and left, the sound of the door closing behind him echoing through the house. Isabella stood there for a moment, staring at the display case. Her heart ached, not because she had lost Edward, but because her worst fears about trust and betrayal had been confirmed yet again. She poured herself a glass of wine and walked out onto the balcony, letting the ocean breeze soothe her. As the waves crashed below, she vowed to never settle for anything less than someone who valued her for who she truly was, not her wealth, but her heart. 3 months later, on a bright Thursday morning, Victoria, Isabella's younger sister, burst into her office with the usual mix of excitement and a little chaos. Isabella had just finished a conference call and was reviewing some legal documents when the sound of hurried footsteps and the soft giggles of a baby interrupted her concentration. "Bella. Guess what?" Victoria's voice rang out as she entered, her baby son, Oliver, cradled in her arms. She was practically bouncing with enthusiasm, her curly hair bouncing with each step. Isabella looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I have the best news," Victoria announced, not waiting for an invitation. She placed Oliver down on a plush chair beside the desk and practically skipped to Isabella's side. "So, you know Thomas Edwards, right? The new corporate lawyer at my firm." Isabella frowned for a moment, trying to place the name. "I think I've heard of him. Isn't he the one who handled that big merger deal last month?" "Yes. Exactly. He's brilliant, Bella, and so charming. You should meet him." Victoria grinned widely, clearly giddy with excitement. She took a deep breath, her eyes sparkling. "I know you've been so focused on work lately, but you deserve someone special, someone who'll treat you right. And I think Thomas would be perfect for you." Isabella felt her heart skip a beat, but she masked it with a polite smile. "I don't know, Vic. I've been so busy. Besides, I'm not really looking for anyone right now." Victoria rolled her eyes, flopping down on the chair beside Oliver. "You always say that. But you need someone who can challenge you, make you laugh, and, most importantly, take care of you. I've never seen someone with so much potential as him. He's ambitious, kind, and, let's be real, incredibly handsome." She raised an eyebrow mischievously. Isabella couldn't help but chuckle. "You're really trying to set me up, aren't you?" Victoria leaned forward, her tone turning serious for a moment. "Yes, because I care about you. You deserve someone who sees you for who you really are. Not just the wealth, not just the image, someone who will appreciate you as a person." Isabella's expression softened. She had heard this from Victoria before. Her younger sister had always been more socially driven, more open to love and connections, while Isabella had built walls around her heart to protect herself from betrayal. "I promise you, he's worth considering," Victoria urged, placing a hand over her chest. "I can see the way he looks at you when we're at work events. He respects you. And I'm pretty sure he's not looking for a quick fling." Isabella hesitated, then glanced at her sister, who was holding Oliver in her lap, the baby's bright blue eyes looking up at her in curiosity. She smiled softly. "All right, Vic, fine. I'll meet him. But no promises." Victoria's eyes lit up like fireworks. "Yes. I knew you'd come around. I'll set up dinner, just the 3 of us. I promise you'll love him." A few days later, Isabella found herself sitting at an elegant restaurant with her sister and Thomas. Victoria had arranged the evening, insisting it would be casual but elegant, a perfect setting to break the ice. Thomas arrived, looking every bit the successful corporate lawyer. His tailored suit fit perfectly, the deep navy collar highlighting his sharp jawline and the intensity in his dark eyes. He exuded confidence but also a calm demeanor, a perfect balance that Isabella couldn't ignore. "Isabella, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, extending his hand warmly as he greeted her. His voice was smooth, with a hint of warmth that made Isabella's guard drop just a fraction. "The pleasure's mine," Isabella replied, shaking his hand firmly. There was something about his presence that was compelling, though she kept her emotions guarded. Victoria watched the exchange with a grin, taking a sip of her wine. "I knew you'd hit it off. Thomas, tell Isabella about that new project you're working on. I know she'd love to hear about it. Thomas leaned in slightly, eager to impress. Well, I've been working on a deal that could change the landscape of how corporate mergers are handled. It's all about strategy and timing, things I know you're familiar with, he said, nodding toward Isabella's business acumen. Isabella raised an eyebrow. Sounds intriguing. I've worked on a few major acquisitions myself, but I'm always curious about new strategies. Their conversation quickly flowed, and what started as a casual dinner turned into a deep discussion about business, philosophy, and the challenges that came with balancing personal and professional life. Isabella found herself intrigued, despite her initial reservations. Thomas didn't seem like the typical opportunist. He had an aura of humility, but there was also a quiet intensity to him that captivated her. As the evening wore on, Victoria's delighted smiles and subtle winks didn't go unnoticed. Isabella, while still cautious, couldn't deny that she was enjoying Thomas's company. He was well-spoken, intelligent, and had a way of listening to her that made her feel valued. As weeks passed, Isabella found herself meeting Thomas more frequently, first for business meetings, then for dinner dates that were gradually becoming more personal. He seemed to respect her independence, never pushing her boundaries, and always giving her space to breathe. But despite the apparent chemistry, Isabella couldn't fully let her guard down. The nagging voice in her head reminded her that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. Yet, something about Thomas felt different. Victoria, of course, couldn't hide her excitement. She often nudged Isabella with hopeful looks, as if she were waiting for the inevitable to happen. I told you he was perfect for you, Victoria would say after each date. You two are great together. Isabella would simply smile, still unsure, but she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Could she let someone into her world again? Could she allow herself to believe in love without fear of betrayal? But deep down, Isabella knew the risks. She'd been burned before, and that was a wound she wasn't ready to reopen. Still, she had to admit, Thomas was beginning to chip away at the walls she'd so carefully constructed around her heart. She and Thomas eventually began dating. It was late afternoon when Isabella's life took another shocking turn. She had been feeling the weight of her responsibilities, both professionally and personally, when she received a call from her financial advisor, Marcus. His voice, usually calm and confident, was laced with urgency. Ms. Hatfield, I need you to come to the office immediately, he said. There's something we need to discuss regarding your recent transactions. Isabella's pulse quickened. What's going on, Marcus? I can't explain it over the phone, but it's urgent, he insisted. Please, just come by. Feeling a sense of foreboding, Isabella decided to drop everything and head to his office. As she drove, her mind raced. Her wealth, her business, her legal team, all of it was built on trust. The thought of someone betraying her trust sent a chill down her spine. She arrived at Marcus's office, a modern space with glass walls and minimalist decor. He was already waiting for her, sitting at his desk, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a tense expression. Marcus, what's going on? Isabella asked, her voice sharp with concern. He motioned for her to sit. We've been reviewing some of your accounts, and there are irregularities. Large withdrawals, checks written out to a lawyer named Thomas. Isabella's stomach dropped. Thomas. He's one of my corporate attorneys. I've known him for a while. Marcus nodded gravely. That's what concerns me, Ms. Hatfield. We've discovered that the signatures on these checks are forgeries, your signature has been copied, and the funds have been transferred to accounts we can trace. Isabella's mind raced. How could this happen? How could Thomas do this? I'm not sure yet, Marcus replied, his voice low. But it looks like someone's been siphoning funds from your accounts for months. It's all traced back to Thomas. Isabella felt the room spin. She had trusted Thomas, had always seen him as loyal, his reputation was impeccable. "You're saying he's been forging my signature on checks?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus nodded. "It appears that way. We've already reported this to the authorities, but I thought you should know immediately." Isabella's heart ached. She had never imagined something like this could happen, especially from someone in her inner circle. She stood up, her hands trembling. "I need to speak to him." The next day, Isabella arranged to meet Thomas in her office, determined to get answers. She had already spoken with her security team, ensuring he wouldn't be able to leave without her knowing. Thomas arrived promptly, as always, wearing his crisp suit and confident smile. But the moment he saw Isabella's expression, he seemed to sense that something was wrong. "Isabella," he greeted her smoothly. "You wanted to see me?" "Have a seat," she said, her tone icy. "We need to talk." Thomas sat down, adjusting his tie. "Of course. What's this about?" Isabella didn't waste time. "You've been stealing from me, Thomas. I know about the forged checks, the withdrawals. I trusted you, and you've been lying to me the whole time." Thomas's eyes widened, his confident mask slipping for a moment. "Isabella, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "We traced the withdrawals, the forged signatures. It's all on record. You've been stealing from me for months." Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Isabella, listen to me. It wasn't like that. I was going to pay it back." "Pay it back?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "You thought you could take my money and just pay it back. This isn't a game, Thomas. This is my livelihood." Thomas leaned forward, his expression desperate. "I never meant to hurt you, Isabella. I was in over my head. The gambling, it got out of control. I was trying to fix it, trying to cover my tracks. I thought I could make it right." Isabella's eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I wouldn't catch on." "I didn't want to lose you," Thomas said, his voice pleading. "I thought I could make it work, but I was wrong. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." "Make it right?" Isabella repeated, her voice trembling with emotion. "You betrayed me, Thomas. You thought you could take my money and walk away without any consequences. Well, you were wrong. I'm done." She stood up, her gaze never leaving his. "Get out. You've lost everything, Thomas. Don't ever come near me again." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but the finality in Isabella's voice silenced him. He stood slowly, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Isabella, he started, but she cut him off. "I said get out." Without another word, Thomas turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Isabella sat down at her desk, her hands shaking as she stared at the empty space where Thomas had just been. Her mind was reeling with the betrayal. She had trusted him with her business, her future, and now everything felt shattered. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from her sister, "Victoria, I heard about Thomas. I'm so sorry, Bella. Are you okay?" Isabella exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. "I will be. It's just hard to believe sometimes." She stared at the phone screen for a moment before typing, "I won't let him ruin me. I've dealt with worse." Victoria's reply came almost instantly, "You're stronger than him. You always have been." Isabella smiled bitterly, though the pain still lingered. She had been betrayed, yes, but she would rise above it. She had no room for people who only wanted to take from her. It was time to rebuild, to trust again, but with eyes wide open, the betrayals left Isabella disillusioned and guarded. Love, it seemed, was a luxury even her billions couldn't buy. At a high-profile networking gala, Isabella found herself cornered by Mr. Langston, a business associate in his 60s. Dressed in an impeccable tuxedo, he sipped his whiskey and leaned in conspiratorially. "Miss Hatfield, I've been meaning to introduce you to someone," he said. "Oh." Isabella replied politely, though she felt a twinge of dread. "My nephew, Gregory," Langston continued. "Brilliant young man, recently graduated from Harvard. He's quite the catch." "I appreciate the thought, Mr. Langston, but—" "Nonsense," he interrupted. "He's here tonight. Let me call him over." Before she could protest, Langston waved over a tall, overly confident man in his late 20s. Gregory smirked as he approached, clearly aware of the matchmaking attempt. "Gregory, this is Isabella Hatfield," Langston said proudly. "Oh, the famous Isabella," Gregory drawled, his tone condescending. "I've heard so much about you." Isabella smiled thinly. "Nice to meet you." The conversation quickly turned to Gregory's achievements, his plans for his future, and subtle comments about Isabella's wealth. She excused herself as soon as politeness allowed. Several months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Isabella decided to indulge herself. That evening, after a long day of meetings, Isabella stood before her full-length mirror. Her emerald green silk blouse shimmered softly in the golden light of her chandelier. She paired it with tailored black pants and stiletto heels that clicked against the marble as she descended the staircase. Her jet black hair was pulled into a sleek low bun, accentuating her sharp cheekbones and piercing gray eyes. She felt restless. The weight of her family's expectations and the sting of recent betrayals hung heavily on her mind. Hoping to escape her thoughts, she decided to visit a wine shop she had read about, a cozy boutique in the arts district known for its rare vintages. She drove to the quaint wine shop nestled in the city's arts district. As she entered the wine shop, she spent some minutes browsing, finally settling on a vintage Bordeaux and approached the counter. The cashier, a young woman with bright red hair, complimented her choice. Distracted by an incoming email on her diamond-encrusted phone case, Isabella barely acknowledged her. She left the shop, clutching the wine, but unknowingly left her Hermes Birkin purse, a crocodile leather masterpiece worth $80,000. As she walked to her car, a voice called out, "Excuse me, ma'am." She turned to see a man jogging toward her, holding her purse. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his sandy brown hair was slightly tousled, and his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. He wore a plaid shirt rolled up at the sleeves, worn jeans, and scuffed brown boots that hinted at a life of hard work. "You left this back at the shop," he said, slightly out of breath but smiling warmly. Isabella froze, her mind racing. She glanced at the purse and then back at the man. In her world, people didn't return things, they took them. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but tinged with surprise. "I hadn't even realized." "No problem," he replied, holding it out to her. "You should be more careful, though. A bag like this could tempt the wrong people." For the first time in years, Isabella laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh. "You're right," she said. "Let me at least buy you a coffee to thank you." The man hesitated, but then nodded. "Sure, I'm David, by the way." They walked to a nearby cafe, a quaint little place with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu. Isabella ordered a latte, while David opted for black coffee. They sat at a small table by the window, the evening sun casting a warm glow over their faces. "So," Isabella began, studying him. "Do you make a habit of rescuing lost purses?" David chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Not exactly. I just happened to be in the shop when you left it. Seemed like the right thing to do." "And what were you doing in a wine shop?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I was picking up a bottle for my sister's birthday," he replied. "She's a wine enthusiast. I'm more of a beer guy." Isabella smiled. He found his honesty refreshing. As they talked, she learned that David was a carpenter who owned a small workshop on the outskirts of the city. He lived modestly in a cozy bungalow surrounded by trees. "What about you?" he asked, leaning forward. "What do you do?" Isabella hesitated. She was used to men becoming overly interested the moment they learned about her wealth. "I run a business," she said simply. David nodded, seemingly unimpressed. "Must keep you busy." "It does," she said, studying his face. He wasn't fishing for details or trying to impress her. He was just real. Isabella learned that David worked as a carpenter. He specialized in custom furniture and had his own small workshop. Unlike the polished, fast-talking men she was used to, David spoke with a quiet confidence. He listened more than he talked, his eyes kind and attentive. Over the next few weeks, Isabella found herself drawn to David. They became very close friends. She visited his workshop, where the scent of sawdust and varnish filled the air. She watched him work, his hands steady and skilled as he shaped wood into intricate furniture. She found herself sharing more than she intended about her struggles with trust, the constant pressure to marry, and her fear that true love might never find her. David, in turn, shared his own story. He had grown up in a modest home, lost his parents young, and had worked tirelessly to build his business. "Money doesn't buy happiness," he said. "It's the people in your life that matter." Isabella felt something she hadn't in years, a genuine connection. One day, he surprised her with a small gift, a hand-carved wooden box with her initials etched into the lid. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth surface. David shrugged. "Thought you might like it." As their relationship deepened, Isabella introduced him to her world, charity galas, business dinners, and exclusive events. Though he often felt out of place among the elite, David never let it show. He stood by her side, his calm demeanor grounding her. Despite their different worlds, they shared a bond rooted in honesty and mutual respect. David treated her not as a billionaire, but as a woman, flawed and vulnerable. But their relationship wasn't without challenges. One evening, Amanda, Isabella's friend, confronted her. "Are you serious about this guy? He's clearly after your money." "I trust him," Isabella replied firmly. But doubts began to creep in. Hadn't she been fooled before? Her fears came to a head when she visited David's workshop unannounced and found him talking to a man in a suit. Their conversation ended abruptly when she arrived, and David looked uneasy. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Just a potential client," he said. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. The scars of past betrayals gnawed at her, and she decided to test David. The next morning, she left a check for $100,000 on his workbench, accompanied by a note, "For your business expansion." When David saw it, his brow furrowed. He went to Isabella's house, holding the check. "What is this?" he asked. "It's to help you," she said, feigning nonchalance. David tore the check in half. "I don't need your money, Isabella. If I wanted wealth, I wouldn't be here. I'm with you because I care about you." Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. In that moment, she knew he was different. Months later, on a quiet beach at sunset, David proposed with a simple wooden ring he had carved himself. "It's not much," he said, "but it's made with love." Isabella, for the first time in years, felt her heart swell with pure joy. "It's perfect," she whispered. Their wedding was a modest affair, attended by close friends, colleagues, and family. Isabella's billions were mentioned only in passing, overshadowed by the genuine love that radiated between the couple. Moral lesson: in David, Isabella found not just a partner, but a reminder that the most valuable treasures in life can't be bought. They are found in the unlikeliest of places, sometimes with a lost purse and a humble carpenter. Dear viewers, we hope you enjoyed this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this story and share it with friends. Also, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to turn on the notifications. We have more interesting stories to share. Thank you for watching.